Big time shout out to Zach Lavine. Last night he hit 10,000 career points as a Chicago Bull. Not 10,000 career points. He passed that a couple years ago. 10,000 points in a Chicago Bulls uniform. 10,000 points for his Chicago Bulls career. One of the few people who's done that. So big time shout out to Zach Lavine. And it's got me wondering, where does he rank all time in terms of Chicago Bulls? Is he top 5? Definitely not. Is he top 10? I don't think so. Is he top 15? I think so. A lot of people don't, but I do. Is he top 20? I think at worst, you got to have him top 20. If he's outside of your top 20, I don't know, man. That's kind of crazy. The way I would rank them, this is strictly just my personal opinion. Obviously, MJ. Then I go Rose. Then I go Pippen. After that, I got Bob Love, Artis Gilmore, Joakim Noah, Jerry Sloan, Norm Van Leer, Dennis Rodman, Horace Grant, DeMar DeRozan, Luol Deng. Then I have Zach Lavine. So that puts Zach Lavine at 13. To round out my top 15, I'd have Jimmy Butler, and then I'd have Tony Kukoc. A lot of people have problems with that. A lot of people are like, how can you rank Zach Lavine ahead of Jimmy Butler? Jimmy Butler, guys, his Bulls career, as time has gone on, it's kind of become overrated, if I'm going to be honest with you guys. He wasn't really the man on the Bulls. His last couple of years, sure, he was the man, I guess. And what did we get out of that? We missed the playoffs one year. We went, I think, 41-41 that year. Missed the playoffs. It's not like he had a bad team. Pau Gasol was still an all-star that year. Derrick Rose, he played most of the games, and he was an above-average level starting point guard. Joakim Noah was still on the team. There was Taj Gibson, Nikola Mirotic. Like, there were pieces on that team. We should not have been a 41-win team. And then the year after that was the three alphas year. That was, that's a better team than what Zach Lavine has had. And that team went 42-40. So if you look at the team Zach Lavine has had in his days as the best player on the Chicago Bulls, take away the DeRozan years, just Zach Lavine's first 3 years as a Bull, and this year's team, those teams were better. He had more help around him, and those teams didn't do shit with Jimmy Butler. All time, if we're talking all-time players, yes, Jimmy Butler is a better player than Zach Lavine. What he's done with the Heat has catapulted him into probably the top 50, top 75 players of all time. Zach Lavine's not near that. But if we're talking strictly as a Chicago Bull, I'm going to take Zach Lavine and what he's done for the Bulls over what Jimmy Butler has done for the Bulls. That's just me, though. If you guys disagree with that, that's fine. I think Jimmy Butler is just a little bit overrated when we discuss all-time Chicago Bulls. Tony Kukoc, that's another one where it's hard for me, man, because, yeah, he won championships. He was a sixth man of the year. He made a big impact on the game, and he's a Hall of Famer. But that Hall of Fame resume, it's really because of what he did internationally and just being a part of the most famous team of all time, and the fact that the NBA Basketball Hall of Fame is the easiest Hall of Fame out of all the major sports to get into. It's like a participation trophy at this point. So that's not too impressive to me. And then I look at that 98-99 season. I wasn't really around for that season. I was watching, but I was a kid. I was like 10 years old. So I didn't really understand the game like that. But I got to imagine that he was pretty disappointing that year. He was billed as the Bulls' best player. Him and Harper were the only guys left over from the dynasty. I don't think people anticipated the Bulls being a 13-win team that year. They obviously didn't think they were going to be champions, but I doubt that preseason hype had them being the worst team in the NBA. And Tony Kukoc was terrible that year. He averaged 18, 7, and 6, but you look at his shooting percentages, he shot 42% from the field and 27% from 3 on 5 attempts a game. And we all know Tony Kukoc didn't play any defense either. So if you're talking about who is a better player between Tony Kukoc and Zach Lavine, I'm going to give it to Zach Lavine, man, because the one time that we saw Tony Kukoc be the best player on a team, it was a disaster. And it's not like he was old at that point. He was 29 at the start of that year. He was 30 by the time the year ended, which is theoretically your prime as a player. So I don't know. That's a hard one for me. The DeMar DeRozan one, people will say, why is DeMar DeRozan ahead of Zach Lavine? Why is he ahead of Jimmy Butler? Why is he ahead of Tony Kukoc? You guys know I'm a huge DeMar DeRozan fan, man. That part, I'll admit my bias on that part. But I think the magic that we saw in the 21-22 season out of DeMar DeRozan, the peak of that year, he was a legitimate MVP candidate that year. I think that trumps anything that I saw out of peak Jimmy Butler, out of peak Tony Kukoc. DeMar DeRozan carried that team, which was a playoff team. He carried that team in a way that those guys just didn't. He carried that team in a way that Zach Lavine just hasn't carried a team to making the playoffs like that. So that's my personal top 15. I know people are going to disagree with it, but that's the beautiful thing about this thing, man. It's my opinion. So that's just how I feel. You guys let me know in the comments where you rank Zach Lavine all time as a Bull. But we got to give him his flowers, man. 10,000 points in a Chicago Bulls uniform. That's impressive.